Napeli. Today is the 12th of November 2005. I'm with Mr. Jayne at the Crystal City Hilton, and we're going to talk a little bit about your memories of the Vietnam War era. As I said earlier, the first thing to do is to get you to introduce yourself. So tell us a little bit about who you are today.
Okay, I'm Colonel Robert Kennon Jayne, K-N-N-O-N-J-A-Y-N-E. I go by Ken.
Okay.
Helps me. Somebody calls for Bob and they're trying to sell me something, I hang up. Okay, I came in the Army in 26 May 1959.
Mm-hmm.
Back in those days, you got a uniform allowance if you were a reserve officer. You did not if you were a regular Army officer.
Mm-hmm.
I was a distinguished military student, distinguished military graduate from Mississippi State University in the ROTC program. Took flight training there, preliminary flight training. But I graduated before I was 21, so they could not commission me in the regular Army. They brought me in for 3 days as a reserve officer. That was worth $100 a day. When the pay for a second lieutenant was $222.30 per month. That was very good. Okay. From there, I was basic branch engineer. I did take preliminary flight training at Mississippi State.
Okay.
So I had already soloed at long fixed-wing aircraft, got orientation into helicopters and so forth. Went to the basic course for the engineer. Went down to flight school at Rucker. First assignment was in Europe, 24th Aviation Company, flying primarily bird dogs and beavers in some very nasty weather, but we could do pretty much anything with a bird dog that a lot of people over there could do with helicopters. Came back from there to the advanced course at Fort Belvoir, engineer advanced course. From there I went direct to helicopter school, Fort Walters it was then. Came back from helicopter school, assigned for the 11th Air Assault Division test, Fort Benning, Georgia. The 11th Air Assault Division was the predecessor to the 1st Cav. In fact, we basically changed the patch and the flag and moved over. We had probably some of the most intense training any aviators have ever gotten in the 11th Air Assault Division. In many ways, it was more intense in combat. In many ways, it was sometimes more dangerous in combat. People were not shooting at you, but we were doing a lot of things in testing the envelope, things which saved many lives when we got to Vietnam. But in a training environment, relatively speaking, dangerous. We changed the flag about May of 1965. I went over to the advance party in August, flew over, so I had about 30 days of combat before the rest of the division came over. We were reminiscing Thursday night. We were assigned to units in country to learn from them. All of us pretty well agreed we could have taught them. We had far better training in the tactics you needed in Vietnam than the people in the country did, that we'd gotten from the 11th Air Assault Division. After about 30 days or so, when the rest of the division came in by ship, we picked up the aircraft crews, instituted the company, and started operations.
And which company?
Charlie Company 229 Assault Helicopter Battalion.
Very good.
It was sort of interesting. I went out to the, I believe it was either the Box or the Croton, I forget which one of the ships. Pick up crews, orient them, send them back to An Kay from Quang Yan. We had a rule then, you had certain requirements before you become pilot in command. What I did not know, based on the ship, was that the, I don't remember, was it 101st or the 173rd? I think maybe in the 173rd, one of the other units in country had got their tail crack. And so they needed support. And so I was sending back Peter pilots that were not qualified to be aircraft commanders with aircraft, without guns, loaded down with everything they could scrounge off the ships, and they were getting there, unloading them, and going out into combat. And it was funny from my aspect, probably not so much funny from their aspect when I got over there, because once the combat requirements were gone, they were back to Peter pilots. They were no longer aircraft commanders. And so they felt a little put upon that since they had flown aircraft commanders their first day in country in combat, you know, why now do they have to go through all this requirement to be qualified as aircraft commanders? But they did anyway. We had rather intensive operations right from the start. Primarily east of An Kay. Nobody's familiar with, I'm sure you are, because you know people from An Kay, where the golf course was and so forth. I'll just give you a story there. By the time we got there, and most of the golf course was complete. It's called the golf course because General was a Knight. I think anyway. I wasn't there, but anyway, he had them cutting it by hand with machetes and whatnot to the water like a golf course. Well, General Beatty happened to be down at Huey Airfield, which is a fixed-wing strip, and we were loading the sandbags and taking them back out to make bunkers. We were all around in T-shirts. Basically, none of us had rank on. Most of us were lieutenants, captains, warrant officers. Had a couple of NCOs there. One of them was Staff Sergeant Austin. Austin had on his fatigue cap that had Staff Sergeant brass on it. And so we found this old knockdown bunker full of sandbags already filled. And, you know, being alert, cunning and sly, we said, why fill them when we got all these already filled? So we started loading this whole 3/4 ton with filled sandbags. And General Beatty came up and says, I gave specific orders that no one was to take sandbags that are already filled. You would fill new sandbags. Who's in charge of this detail? All the lieutenants and captains and warrants look around at each other and saw Austin there. Says, here's. And the general proceeded to chide Sergeant Austin, who was not the lowest ranking person, I was the second from the lowest ranking person, and we bought him a beer later. Anyway, one of those little things you do in combat. Some of the funny aspects. Anyway, from there, we went a lot of different places, but to kind of get you pretty fast up to Ia Drang. The last big battle just before the Ia Drang was the Battle of Play Me. We had gone into Play Me after most of the action, basically the mop-up action. From there, they had sent the 2nd and the 7th in the LC X-ray. Alpha Company had the primary mission, Charlie Company filled in, which typically whenever you had a mission there, you put everybody into it. I was in on the later parts of the X-ray. Okay. What I remember basically about that, besides the fire and the tight LZ, was we took one prisoner out of there. It's, you know, that's kind of unusual for us. We took a prisoner back with us. Most of that, though, was Bruce Crandall and the people that were under him at that particular time, Bullock and so forth. Fast forward until, I guess it was the 16th or the 17th, from the 2nd or the 7th, was walking from LZ Columbus to LZ Albany. Ken Weitzel, who was one of my lieutenants, infantry officer, we had decided that because we felt that the 2nd and the 7th needed a little extra help in coordinating aviation activities and whatnot, we sent Ken down. I think somebody's already interviewed Ken. We sent Ken Weitzel down then as basically the Army Aviation Liaison Officer to be with the S3 section of the 2nd and 7th, march along with him, etc. I'm not sure he's forgiven us yet, because he was there right in he is an infantry officer, and so he was there right in the battle. I made a couple of flights in that day. I had gone back to the hooch, and sometime after midnight, someone came in and woke me up and said, we need a volunteer mission to go in and to take some ammunition, some medicine, some water, supplies into Albany and bring wounded out. They've got, I forgot how many, 16 or 17 wounded. They've basically been triaged into the category that they'll make it if they get treatment, they won't make it if they don't. And, you know, will you go? And said yes. And our whole crew went. And Will Bennett, and I don't know right now who, but Will Bennett and his crew, Will and I flew a lot together. So. And once you fly one of these volunteer missions, it's difficult to ever not volunteer for one. Anyway, we went in there, heavy fire, and we had everything from A1E dropping bombs and artillery and flares and whatnot. And I remember Will with the flares coming down. Finally, just no, I don't want to say it. Cease fire with the flares. And then we saw a T over there, and so Will says, I have the T in sight and I'm coming in, and somebody on the ground, I remember it was Ken or someone else, says, negative, 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 says the T is not under our control, do not land on the T. So we avoided that approach. Of course, we're flying without lights. And he says, where are you? And he says, look off to your right front and you'll see a flashlight blinking. sure that was the little red hats or whatever, blinking. And we said, Roger, you know, I just saw you blink 3 times, whatever. He says, Roger, that's me. And he says, okay, we'll come in on you. And so we came in, landed to the flashlight, picked up the wounded, took water file over there. We had to move the aircraft a little bit to try to get out of where the mortars were landing. And my crew chiefs and gunners at the time were out there, you know, bringing people in, so they had to bring them a little farther. And then we got them all loaded back, flew in. Our fuel state had gotten so low that when we landed at the medevac pad, we did not have enough fuel to hover over to the flight line and be refueled at the normal location. So Major Bennett, Will Bennett is there. Mission commander says, cut up here, guys, the fuel truck come to us. While we were waiting for the fuel truck, we went out and basically, you know, talked and then let the people were just evacuated, because if you bring that many people, it takes a while for the stretcher bearers to get them all in. And I will always remember Command Sergeant Major Scott, who was there, and I could see from his back the little black holes going through him. And he's up there walking around, putting his arm around his troops and saying, hang on, John, you know, we're here and there, we're back, you know, you got it made, they can be taking you in there in just a minute, you know, hang on. And then, and talking to me, I don't know who else was there, but he says, when we heard those helicopters coming in, he said it sounded like the wings of angels flapping. And so I thought that was a nice thing to say, and I was sure from his aspect that's probably exactly what it sounded like, and that got picked up at the time, and it just made some of the news things. I often wondered what happened to him and found out he survived the war. I was down in Florida and recently passed away. From that, we finished our tour with combat operations in a whole bunch of places. I'll just hit some of the highlights. We were talking about this last night. One of the most helpless times I ever felt, we were flying over near Cambodia. We picked up an alert on Lake Reconnaissance Patrol. They were in the aircraft sitting down, not tied down anything. And I looked back, and there was a grenade rolling on the floor. Well, normally when a grenade is rolling around like this, it means that it has popped off somewhere. The handles initiated the firing chain, and you got 10 seconds before it goes off. And I can't do anything with the aircraft because I'd lose all the alerts. And of course I'm hollering over the intercom to the crew chief and the gunner, you know, grab that blankety blank grenade. And obviously the end of the story was good, or I wouldn't be here. What had happened was the grenade had come unscrewed, and the firing chain was still on somebody's web harness. But nevertheless, it is an extreme feeling of knowing things are going to happen and not being able to do anything, having several alternatives, none of which are any good. And like I said, fortunately it worked out. I guess one of the most frustrating times was we went to Tuiwa. It was an unusual day. I wound up going through 4 airplanes. The last one, we sat on the ground for several hours while they were prepping the LZ. The battleship New Jersey fired on it, Pac Air was on it, artillery fired on it, gunships fired on approaches and everything else. We landed into, it's kind of a 3-sided field bounded by hedgerows, flat of 4. As we're coming in, my right-hand wingman, Yellow 2 I believe it was, I was Yellow 1, said, I'm on fire, I'm going around. And I looked up and saw him sort of landing with the rest of us, trying to continue on, and then boom. The other 3 aircraft got in. We worked off a crossfire. Those guys with spider holes. It must have been tough on the infantry. They bailed out and, you know, engaged in the fire, and they didn't waste any time getting out. We didn't waste any time getting out of the LZ. We got out of the LZ, fell off the cliff where the wreckage of the aircraft was. So it was on the side of the cliff. No way you could land, just ashes. We went down to an LZ we'd been earlier that day, but that time it got dark. It was no longer in friendly hands, but at least we knew where it was. So we went in and landed there. Crew chief had got to shine flashlights up the bullet holes to see what you hit in the rotating parts. If you hit any control systems, that light beam is a control system. You got no choice but to shut down. You check to see it. If you got a control rod that's been hit, it may go at any time. You're going to die and everybody with you. Fortunately, it did not hit any of the rotating parts. So we flew out to the beach. There was a fuel dump there. We landed and refueled. As we were starting to refuel, the crew chief comes up and goes this. Says, "Cut it, sir, cut it, cut it." So I cut the engine. I said, "Why was wrong?" He says, "Sir," I said, "we got fuel running all over the place." They had blown up because they took a round through the fuel cell. We took 7 rounds through the fuel cell, did not blow. The difference being our rounds undoubtedly went through fuel, their rounds went through air. You put a round through fuel, it won't blow. You put it through a fuel mixture, it'll blow. We took the guns, the radios, the crew, put on one of the other birds and flew back. That was the 4th bird. Big stuff there. That was about 2 weeks before I was due to come home. And we lost crew of 4 from Charlie Company, Don Estes. What was Townsend's first name? Delmar Townsend. And I don't remember the crew chief and gunner. I did. In fact, when I came back, I stopped in and talked to Don Estes' family and Delmar Townsend's wife. And I remember, I think I got to one of the enlisted crew chief or gunner. Basically the ones that had been there and having to be where I could get to them while I was there. Anyway, that's about it from the Ia Drang perspective.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that night landing? I don't know anything about helicopters, okay? So just remember that you're sort of talking to an undergraduate student, effectively, of the helicopter. Putting a helicopter down on a landing zone you can't see under intense fire, as hard as it sounds to me.
Well, it's not easy. There's a big difference, too. At that time, we had what were called D models. And the D model had 1,100 horsepower engine. Our D model was vastly underpowered for the temperatures and altitudes that you had in Vietnam.
Okay.
And so although we were in with low fuel states, so we could carry more people in and out, we nevertheless were still out on the edge of the power curve.
Okay.
Later on, we brought out an H model of 1,300 something horsepower, which was far better. In fact, it was limited by the transmission, not by the engine.
Okay.
So that in itself is a limiting factor because you can't just pull pitch and go, because the harder you pull pitch after a certain point, instead of getting more power, you lose power. It's like trying to step on the accelerator when you're in high gear, starting from a start if you're good with a manual transmission. So that in itself is bad. But then you don't want to present any more of a target than you have to, so you don't put your lights on at all.
Right.
And so you fly in formation, guided basically on the instrument lights of your wingman. So you're looking at instrument lights and realize you got a 48-foot rotor and he's got a 48-foot rotor. And if you get any closer than 48 feet, you're both going to die. So you got pretty well know where you are in relation to the aircraft. And the other side is if you get too far back, you know, you may have a heck of a time getting in there with him. So it's difficult. We made it all right despite a whole lot of things. I will say that we were all volunteers. Everyone who went, crew chief, gunners, pilots. I would have pushed the aircraft commander. Pilot was St. Paul, along with the rest of the day. But we all each made an individual decision to go. Anyone could have said, no, I don't feel right on this, and we got somebody else. Nobody backed out. And that's one reason I'm a little unhappy with the award policy and that they tend to award the commanders a little higher. And so I got a higher award than some of the other people. I think everybody makes an individual decision, you know, you ought to get the same award. But anyway, that's not the way it's done. I do recall one other mission that was not Ia Drang, but Will Bennett probably told his interviewer, but I'll relate it also. This, I think, was after this mission. And Will and I both volunteered. Like I said, once you go on this mission, you cannot not volunteer. Somebody says we got a need, you're going to go. Okay, and that Sergeant Major Scott, Wings of Angels Flatman certainly helps you to make the decision. You know, I want to go. Anyway, they had a muzzle burst, an artillery battery, and they had killed, I don't know how many, and they wounded 10, 12 people. Medevac would not go in. Unfortunately, during the CAV's initial period, about the first day in combat, they lost a Medevac Lieutenant Commander around to the head. And so it took a while for leadership to overcome that, and leadership to overcome it, and leadership to overcome losing the commander, and then them to get the other pilots to fly. So they refused to fly. The weather was heavy fog right down the treetops. We went. Will led the flight. Will's a field artillery. We couldn't see it, but he had them fire a WP, right, phosphorus, on the gun target line. And so we flew aiming instruments, low level, in the fog, from flash to flash to flash. And don't ask me how we made it, because I was going to freeze them out and everything. That's what we did. We got in, landed up there, picked up the troops.
So creative professionalism.
Yeah, and you know, I think, you know, I was just following Will. Will was the one that thought of using the white phosphorus, you know, like signpost on the way.
Were there lessons that you guys learned about flying these missions from those early days outside of Plainee and into the...
Well, actually, we learned the lessons in Benny.
You did?
Yeah. See, before we came over, the policy general was, in general, that you try to stay 2,500 feet or higher, you got to give a effective 50 kilo range, if possible, and if not, at least 1,500 feet, we got you above small arms range. We didn't fly that way. We trained where we could go against anything, with the small arms, 50 caliber, 20 millimeter, 37 millimeter, whatever, and we flew in treetops. If you didn't come back with limbs in your skids, you weren't flying high, low enough. That was a major difference. Navigation is much more difficult. Flying is more difficult, but it's a lot safer, because if you've ever been in a city where the police are around running helicopter patrols, and you hear them and try to locate them, you'd be amazed how hard it is to tell where they are when they're at low level. You can hear the sound, and it kind of sounds like it's all around you. So as a result, by flying low like that, we were much less likely to get hit by any form of fire. Not that we didn't, but we were much more effective. And they usually didn't know where we were until we were on a short final, and timing was very, very important. I mean, you synchronized your watches, you had to be within 5 seconds. And the reason you did was that you typically, on a typical operation, you have TAC air, artillery, whatever, prepping the LZ. But you didn't want it too early, because if you had it too early, the bad guys knew where you were coming. But you wanted to basically try to get as many of them as you could that way. Everybody you kill that way is somebody you ain't going to deal with later. Unfortunately, sometimes they just burn in the holes. But at least you kept their heads down. Then you had the gunships come in. Okay, and the gunships come in, do what is called a daisy chain on each side of the helicopters as they come in. And then you are on a short final, and on a short final, your guns, which are waist guns, M23s, they're firing suppressive fire, and they are sector fire. So ideally, what happens, if you get everything down, they prep the LZ with the big stuff, you get to the release point, the last rounds are on the way, don't want to be there early, don't want to be there late. Okay, late, you're not covered for a period of time, you're early, you want to get a good air with an artillery shell, that's not too good. But the gunships are covering you, and you're on short final, your guns are covering you. And so you got continuous coverage, and then as soon as the infantry gets out, they head out and start laying down a base of fire. The idea is the whole time to keep the bad guys down. It's not so much to kill them. To do, that's great. But the main thing is to keep them down. Okay, so they can't fire at you. And then the infantry engages them if they don't have. I remember one operation we had, and I don't remember the LZ, but it was east of 1K. I think it was in Happy Valley. It was, quote, a cold LZ.
Yeah.
That meant that intelligence said there were no VC there, but we're not going to prep it. Okay, we went in there. We did not prep it. We were on a short vinyl. We started taking fire. My M23 started laying down their suppressive fire. The one on my side jammed. As we landed, a guy popped up from a ditch line, a creek line over there, about 75 feet or so away, and proceeds to blow out the little plexiglass window that's in the door. There's a little, about 12-inch door right here, right behind the pilot of the go-kart. Blew that window out. That got my attention. Everybody else was on the aircraft. It was behind me. And so the closest weapon I had at the time was a backup weapon that was inside my flight vest behind the first aid kit. The others were hanging back here, and so the guy was right there with the AK, and I did not want him to fire again. So I pulled out that 38 and rested it on that, and I was taught in combat firing, you fire a double tap, bang, bang. In real combat, it's bang, 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 click, 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 click. Because I fired, continued to fire until it was empty. Center mass, he went down. Of course, at the same time, I've got my foot on the full mic, calling the gunships in. The gunships come in and straight the creek. But so much for cold LZs.
Yeah.
Seldom were. So much for intelligence. We talk about intelligence and weapons of mass destruction. Intelligence is the best in art. A lot of variables.
So then I need to hear a little bit more about training at Benning, I think, in order to understand how well prepared you were. You've said that you were intensely prepared. In some ways, combat was easier, or you were prepared for it as a.
Let me just say, we had the Carolina maneuvers.
Yeah.
Which we basically fought the 82nd Airborne Division and won. But in some of the unusual things we did at training, we flew formations IFR in the clouds.
I didn't hear you very well.
We flew formations in the clouds.
In the clouds.
Where you couldn't really see the guy very well. Okay. Very dangerous.
How did we
lost some ships. When we lose a ship, we lose 2 ships wrong because we sit there. We flew formations at night without lights. We used that in Vietnam, remember? But we did, obviously, in training. We flew landing to FM radios using the ARC-44s, which are a directional finding capability you had on the Huey. You had 2 antennas on the front, and you can point the aircraft and pick up a null and go into a radio. We actually shot approaches on it in training as a way to get in at night, and we did that in combat. We flew extensively in low-level formation flying.
So you were good at flying the contour of the ground, I guess, long before you arrived.
And to do that, you got to have one guy navigating. And the guy that really has to do most of the navigating is the lead ship. But he can't be the only one. Because if he gets shot down, somebody's got to take over. So what really happens is that normally you have someone flying and somebody navigating working radios. And if you're an officer, a leader, a commander, normally you're sitting in the left seat. The pilot is actually doing the flying most of the time. You're working the radios, communicating, navigating, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And there, and in fact, frequently if you go into high LZ, both of you on the controls, so if one of you gets hit, you go to flop over the aircraft, flops over too if it does.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
We had the usual mechanical incidents in training, which certainly helps for the ones you had in combat, because a lot of the problems we had in combat were caused not by bullets, but just by the intensive off-tempo we had, and so many hours that we were putting on engines, airframes, and not to mention the people, the engines and airframes. So in fact, you did have mechanical problems as well as problems caused by the enemy.
What about the fatigue you guys felt?
I think adrenaline helped a lot on that. You kind of crashed when you came back. Theoretically, we had a limit, I think, of 14 hours. No, then it was 140 hours a month, and which is far above what most airlines they less. But at 140, you went to the flight surgeon. The flight surgeon said, "You all right?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "Okay." He went back to put water. So it didn't become a limiting factor. Oddly enough, do not recall ever being completely fatigued in flight, in combat. Maybe because there was just so much adrenaline. The only time I remember that was in my second tour, and we had a kind of an unusual day. And the last 3 or 4 hours in which they had a report of a bomb on a bridge over the Saigon River. And so at the end of the mission, just before we were fixing to fly back, they asked us to pick up some UDT people, bring them in, land on the bridge. They were going in and check for them, take them back out, and so forth. That day, we flew 17 flight hours. So when I got back and landed the aircraft and got out, I could not stand up. I mean, I literally got out of the aircraft and just collapsed. Because you had 17 hours of vibration too, and that's fatiguing.
I'm sure.
That's the only time I ever remember, really being fatigued when I got in the aircraft.
What you're kind of suggesting to me is that the Ia Drang is in some ways just one moment in your first tour. I didn't realize you'd done 2 tours. And in terms of the combat experience it provides, it's not especially notable in some particular fashion.
Well, it's certainly notable because a lot of good people died.
But in terms of
it's certainly notable because it was the first real operation we had against North Vietnamese troops. The most notable thing to me was that the sounds of the wings of angels flapping. I'll always remember that. And that's one of the things that made it impossible to ever say no to a request for a volunteer after that.
I see. I hear what you're saying now. I get it. On a human level, then it had a deeper significance, resonated. But on a professional level, you were prepared for this.
Sure.
From Benning.
Not to downplay the intensity of the combat, but there were many operations. But so far as aviation was concerned, we had this as much in the way of being shot and hit. And it's funny. The infantry would tell me that they were extremely nervous when they were in our airplanes and we were taking fire. And the reason is because they're out of their environment. They can't control it. They don't have their radios to call artillery in. They can't take their M16s or M40s or whatever and engage the enemy. All they can do is ride along and hope that we're doing our job.
Yes.
Well, the opposite is also true when we're on the ground. And we were on the ground in a log area waiting. I think there were about 4 ships, Will Bennett, myself, and 2 of us. And we were taking under fire on the ground. We felt the same way. We don't have our aircraft radios, we don't have our gunships, we can't call in artillery, and we got 38. Or to get back to the aircraft and be an M16 or a shotgun, whatever your scrounge is hanging on the back of the seat. And I recall we were in this log area, and let me lead up to it first. There was a fellow by the name of Lee Merle, Chief Warrant Officer, M-U-R-R-E-L-L. He got shot in the head on an earlier mission. Bullet went in here, came out here. Right. And in fact, the guy I was flying with him is here with us today. And of course, everybody thought, man, he's gone. They took his helmet off. The bullet hit, went around his skull, came out the other side, did nothing but cut his scalp. He had a hell of a headache and a scar on his head. Anyway, Lee was there. Well, Lee wasn't that lucky this time. I recall Lee getting hit in the hip Will thinks he got hit in the gut, but I evacuated him, and I recall that he was hit in the main femur, which is tremendously painful and very dangerous because it can cut you from all along. Anyway, he was hit bad. And then Dave Hep got hit just in the here, which wasn't quite so bad. Anyway, Will's ship had gotten shot, mine had not. I was in the process of walking from my ship over to Will's to talk about something when the fire started. And I hit the ground, and the bullets were zapping overhead, and they have a very distinct crack when they come right at you. And I thought about trying to return fire with my 38, but I couldn't see a target, and I didn't really want to call any more attention to myself than I had already. So I just hunkered down and then got on over, and Will said, you know, would you fly Lee and Dave back to Cape, medevac? Our ships have been hit, you know, we need to check them out. So we flew back. I guess we flew back 5-2. You almost did then. You almost never flew a single ship unless you couldn't avoid it. And got back and landed at the medevac pad. And what was kind of funny, we landed and they're taking them off, and then all of a sudden these crewmen come back and they hit these things. The seat folds back and they unstrap my belt and start pulling me out. And I said, "What in the hell are you doing?" And he says, "I'm taking you out." And I said, "What do you mean you're taking me out?" He says, "You're wounded." And I said, "The hell I am." He says, "The hell you are." I said, "Look at your chest, you got blood all over you." I looked down, she had blood. What had happened? I just had a graze. I forget which cheek it was now. I never knew it, never felt it, you know.
Oh,
but it bled like son of a gun, and you know, with the adrenaline, you didn't feel it. I said, "Screw it. Give me a band-aid, I'm going back," you know. And we went back. I had thought of that a lot when John Curry was talking about his Purple Hearts, you know.
Yeah.
Because Will says, "Well, I'll put you on the Purple Heart." And I said, "For what? You know, for a Band-Aid?" I said, "I didn't go in there and get any treatment." But it was kind of funny because I didn't even throw it off. I hadn't bought anything on me. And it just shows in combat there's so many things going on that things that when you think about, you would notice. You don't notice. You're intent upon one thing, and that's doing your mission, taking care of the people that are with you, and getting back alive if you can.
And flying that helicopter in the most professional, confident fashion that is possible.
Well, that's what we get
Put that alive.
Yeah. A couple of things that happened early on, and these are a little aside from Ia Drang, but best of my knowledge, no one knew it at the time. But we had landed somewhere up in the Highlands, and before I landed, I had like 400 pounds of fuel on board. Fuel was 1,400. And you normally will have a 30-minute reserve, which is about 200-some pounds.
Okay.
And we landed a little hard. I looked at the fuel gauge. It's down at less than 200 pounds, and the fuel lights on, and the pressure lights on, and some other things. And so I said, "What the heck, you know, what's going on?" And so they called back, and he says, "Well, it's probably the fuel gauge. They'll bring you a new fuel gauge." So I think this guy came out and put a new fuel gauge in and went back to like 400 pounds or something. And I said, "Well, it must be all right." So we took off a little more, and all of a sudden the fuel pressure light came on again. And we said, "Hey, we got a fuel pressure light." And he says, "Well, go ahead and fly back to Allen. So we flew back to Allen, and that's one I flew as high as I could, and I went from clearing to clearing to clearing because this daggone thing quit. We wanted to have a reasonable place to put it down. We got back to Allen and quit on short final, and got in there all right, and nobody was hurt. And, you know, they just said, "Well, it must have been too bad fuel gauge." Anyway, whatever it was, and they didn't think that much about it. It happened again to me. By which time, and I didn't realize it happened to other people too. Well, what had occurred, we discovered, is there was a fungus in Southeast Asia with the high humidity that liked to eat JP4. And so this fungus was in the fuel tanks. We didn't have it completely full, we had moisture in it. And then that fungus would stop up little holes and baffles between the three fuel tanks. And so you had an engine-driven fuel pump, you had an electric fuel pump, and you had a big air-driven fuel pump. And somehow one of the fuel pumps that maybe stopped working, the baffles got stopped up, so the way it was measuring the fuel, that tank remained fuel because it didn't transfer to one of the others, and it gave you a false reading. That's what it was. I guess they've corrected it now. but it was some exciting times. And fortunately, I didn't get hurt. In fact, I had to have it there one other time. At least I knew what it was, and I landed right away as soon as I could, turn on fuel. But it's one of those things. You learn things that nobody ever thought of.
But the machine,
nobody ever thought of.
Right. The machine has its own, I don't know, what you would call it, characteristics.
This was an organism.
But it was living in this.
Yeah, and we didn't have any problems in the United States with it. So apparently it was some fungus that was endemic to Southeast Asia, like JP4. Which, you know, if you think about it now, you got bioremediation, you got bacteria that eat petrocarbons and so forth. So now we know all about it. And somebody maybe knew about it then, but we didn't.
But it just gives the machine a particular set of performance characteristics that you had to learn.
It changed the performance characteristics, right?
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about coming to these reunions and what brings you and what do you find here?
Well, probably the reason that I came to the last one, which was the first one I came to, is a fellow by the name of Paul Winkle. I suspect Paul has talked to you.
I don't know him, but I've heard his name.
Okay. He's a colonel also. He was in the 229th Alpha Company. And Paul has done two things. He's writing a book from the aviation standpoint.
Okay.
I'm not sure how well he's doing on it. I know I'll wait up a chapter which I haven't written. So if he's not any better than I am, he's in bad trouble. But he also felt that because the administrative chain in these operations was non-existent, the tactical chain was fine. We had no problem supporting it. Okay. But we put together these task forces made up of people in a lot of different units, and so they have different commanders, different administrative chains, and so forth. And so he felt that a lot of people unfairly had not been recognized. Okay. And so he started pushing, and in fact got Congress to approve a bill, basically relook at awards, and establish some, for lack of a better term, they call relook boards. They go back in and to look at people who had done heroic actions and where they had eyewitness accounts and etc., but for various reasons never been recognized. Or they had been recognized at a very low level in comparison to what other people under similar circumstances recognized. And as a result of all that, you know, it took a lot of us that frankly had never really delved back into that part of our past.
Yes.
You know, it was past, and we just considered it past. It wasn't something we wanted necessarily to relive. He kind of forced us to relive it. As a result of that, when the one came up last year, there was significant, I won't say pressure, but you know, significant. A lot of guys said, "Well, you know, let's go up there." So we came up for it, and I came up for this one. We're, you know, Charlie Company 229 is staying in the Barry Hotel. We stayed there because at the time I made the arrangements, and I made them. We were scheduled to have a reception in the Kennedy Center. We were scheduled to have a dinner in the D.C. Armory. And the only thing we did down here basically was, that's where everybody already stayed. And it made a lot more sense for us to stay there and just go right across the street to the Kennedy Center. And also, we typically hold a function of our own, and we were going to do the Tom Sawyer's. So for us, it worked out very, very well. Like a lot of plans, they were changed by other people, and we no longer went to the Kennedy Center, we no longer went to the D.C. Armory. So we're there, and we're having a whole other reunion besides. And we went to Tom Sawyer's last night and having a great time at Tom Sawyer's. So to us, I think we're getting an awful lot out of the reunion with Charlie Company 229. Now, I will be honest and admit that with Charlie Company, Ia Drang is probably not as big a deal as it is with Bruce Crandall. And so we'll probably continue to meet. I'm not sure that we'll go along necessarily every year with the big reunion, because we felt a certain togetherness there, all right, that with 229 in general, really, In fact, Bruce was not there. Bruce identifies more, I think, with the overall Ia Drang. All of us, not all of us, I remember the first Canadian Association. I was at Fort Hood in 1981 to 1986. Knew the people in the first Canadian very well, as I did the people in the 2nd Armored Division. I was at headquarters Central. And told them, obviously, maintain all our contacts. And it's been good to come here, but there are people, I don't want this to sound wrong, there are people that are almost professional veterans. And there's some of us that was a point in our life, we're proud of what we did, we're proud of the people who were there, we love the people who were there. We've had other lives and we do other things, and that's a relatively small part of our life. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And the other people, it's a defining moment, and that's fine. That's fine. But you can tell us, because you don't see us with the Stetsons and all the stuff on there. You see us dressed like this. Not anything wrong with it. That's absolutely fine to do that. I like the deer hunt. Some people don't. Some people like to, that's a defining moment, and they'll spend the rest of their lives remembering it. It's hard to break the bonds forged in combat.
Sure.
And it's just little differences to how the bonds were forged.
Well, right, and I think that's part of what I hear between as a distinction between aviation people more broadly and infantry.
Yeah.
You guys fought a different war in a funny way.
And we supported a lot of people. And we knew a lot of the infantry guys very, very well. Frank Henry, for one, who was the XO of the 2nd to 7th. And undoubtedly would have made general officer had he not died from a aneurysm, jogging. We tend to pick up more personalities that we've dealt with.
Sure.
In supporting people. On the other hand, if you're a grunt in the line and the two guys on each side of you, you guys got to stick together. And I think that's one of the points I think that Hal Moore made in his book, that people don't fight necessarily for freedom or for their country or for all these altruistic things, and then the bullets fly and they fight for the guy on each side of them.
And who did you fight for?
I'm sorry?
And who did you fight for?
I don't know. I never thought of it that way. It's a little different, I think, in an aircraft. That is, when you're down there with the guy on each side of you and the bullets fly, because you're in a compartment, and you certainly try to take care of everybody you got in there, and the people on the ground, and going in and all that. But it's not quite the same thing. I'm not saying you don't get scared. You should get scared in an aircraft too, but it's not quite the same thing.
Good.
So I think we fought because we felt that we were doing some good over there. And it's tremendous disappointment to a lot of us that fought over there and saw a lot of good people lose their lives over there, that we didn't accomplish what was intended to be accomplished. And we didn't lose the war militarily. We lost the war politically. People like Hannah and Jane Fonda, politicians, had decided that the war was no longer popular, therefore they no longer supported. We left a lot of good Vietnamese people, good people, we left them high and dry. Well, left our country did. And that's a shame.
When did your second tour end? You did two tours?
My second tour started right as Tech 68 ended, and ended right as Tech 69 began. So I got a little bit of both, but I didn't have to go through either one of them, and a very different tour.
Yeah. I would have guessed that it's a different war that you saw.
Yeah, well, it also was different. I'm an engineer and an aviator, so when I went back, when it came time to go back, I said, where do you want to go? And I said, well, I'm an engineer and an aviator. Send me back someplace where I can do as much as I can with both skills.
Okay.
And so I was the aviation officer for each of their troops, the 20th Brigade, 3 and 4 Corps, and then later on for all engineers in Vietnam. We supported them. Of course, I changed tactics a little bit. A lot of the pilots that were used to flying a little fairly conservatively flew a lot less conservatively after I came in there. But I was still used to flying the way we did the cab, you know. And then I set up a semi-official policy that my young warrants had never been there in combat. After 6 months flying engineers around, and then I arranged to swap them with some warrants that had been flying for one of the CAS squadrons or someone else in combat, bring them up, you know, and get them into something flying a little different type mission, and get these guys down and do some war fighting until they got some war stories. And some of them appreciated it, and some didn't. One of the first ones I sent down was a good pilot. And I picked him as one of the first ones because I thought he was a good pilot. And I thought that if I were he, I would want to go home and not say that I flew engineer colonels around. I don't want to go back and say I fought the war in the Delta, you know, and flew a cab gunship and so forth. And so I said, I forget where, I think it was one of those CAS squadrons. And he came to me and said, "So what did I do wrong?" And I said, "You didn't do anything wrong." I said, "You did a great job." And it's because of that, you know, I said, I'm giving you a chance to go down and, you know, really, you know, do some great things in a combat unit. And I don't think he appreciated it. Most of the rest of them did. I don't think he was a coward. I just don't think he had the same viewpoint that I thought he would.
I think I'm afraid it's 3 o'clock and we have to stop.
Yeah,
I don't like doing this.
I tell you, I didn't think it was going to go half an hour. I'm surprised I talked for an hour. Yeah, I think that pretty well covered it.
Good. Thank you, sir.
Okay.